Hi, I'm Dr. Eugene O'Loughlin and welcome to this lesson on problem solving techniques. In this lesson, we're going to take a look at force field analysis. So at the end of this lesson, what we should be able to do, here are our objectives. We want to first of all define what is meant by force field analysis, then identify forces that reinforce positives, and also identify forces that eliminate negatives. And we're going to use force field analysis to help us make decisions, especially involving change. Force field analysis is part of Section 6, Process Improvement, in our curriculum, and we can see that it is the third of three techniques that we use to help us solve problems when we want to improve processes. So our inspirational quote for this lesson comes from Steve Jobs. If you define the problem correctly, you almost have the solution, he once said. So force field analysis is about the problem of changing. There's a discipline called change management, and it's often something very, very difficult to do. And force field analysis is one technique that helps us to overcome change. So when we're making a change, we want to be able to define the problem correctly to help us solve the problem. So the first thing that we need to do is identify the forces. Business people often struggle when they have tough decisions to make. They concentrate through the advantages and disadvantages, the positives and the negatives, and sometimes really struggle over making the right decision. So when you are making difficult or challenging decisions, it's vital to use an effective, structured decision-making technique that will help solve our problems and improve the quality of our decisions in order to increase the chances of success. So force field analysis is one such technique, and here we'll explore what it is and how you can use it. So it helps us to reinforce positives and eliminate negatives. So these are the forces that we have. And the equilibrium between forces that drive change and others that resist change, we want to figure out what they are. But one thing about force field analysis is that it's really, really simple to do. So on the right hand side here, you can see we can identify the driving forces that are driving us towards the change, and also what are the restraining forces that are preventing or making change very, very difficult. You can do this on a whiteboard or in a flip chart or on a piece of paper. So it's really, really simple to actually do. So what does force field analysis do? Well, it presents us with a list of positives and negatives. These are the forces for and against the change. It forces us to think together about all the aspects of making the desired change, and it encourages us to agree about the relative priority of factors on each side of the balance sheet that you see in the diagram here. It encourages honest reflection on the real underlying root causes of a problem and its potential solution. And it's also a nice, easy way to communicate the reasoning behind any decision. So when you do this and you have a full list of driving forces and a full list of restraining forces, it can be a nice visual that helps you in your problem solving. So how do we do it? First of all, we define our goal or a vision for the change. So we write our problem statement down at the top of the page or at the top of the chart. And so we put that down. I put it at the top of the page. You can put it anywhere you like, but in a box somewhere on the page. Next thing you do then is we're concentrating on change here. So we want to see, well, what is the ideal state? So we put the ideal state in a box over here in the top right hand corner. And then we identify the forces for change. Now, what are the drivers that are driving change? Well, our internal drivers could be things like outdated machinery or product lines, declining team morale, a need to increase profitability. Some external drivers could include an uncertain or volatile operating environment, changing demographic needs, or disruptive technologies. So these could be the internal and external drivers that could force a change. And then we need to identify the forces against the change. So what are the restraining forces? So it could be internal resistance to change could be things like your organizational structure or fears of the unknown, or even things like that's not how we do it around here attitudes. External factors could be commitments to your business partners, laws and legislation from government, and obligations towards your customers. So what are the driving forces and what are the restraining forces? So let's take a look at an example. In this example here, we want to improve your public speaking. So the ideal state here is that you would speak confidently, and we want to be able to identify the driving forces and the restraining forces that could be preventing me from speaking confidently. So I want to improve public speaking, and in particular to speak confidently. So the force field can help individuals and teams select targets for change. And when you're in choosing a target for change, remember that simply pushing the positive factors for a change can have the opposite effect. This tends to break the change bottleneck rather than just pushing on all the good reasons to change. So the first thing to identify is to identify driving forces. Now this example is taken from a small book by Brassard and Ritter, published way back in 1994, The Memory Jogger Part 2, and this is some of the driving forces that are listed in Brassard and Ritter's book. So some of the driving forces are, it could increase, to speak confidently that is, it could increase your self-esteem, helps your career, communicate your ideas a bit better, and help others to change. There are others, but I'm just listing these four here. So let's take a look at the restraining forces. The restraining forces are things like, what about past embarrassments, or you're afraid to make mistakes, or you may forget what to say, or you might have a lack of knowledge on the topic that you're speaking about. And these are some of the restraining forces from the Memory Jogger book. So when you focus on the restraining forces, not the driving forces, this sometimes can work best, and it's often more helpful to remove barriers. So for example, using index cards for key points may reduce the fear of may forget what you want to say. So force field analysis then can be very, very useful to help us decide whether or not we want to implement a decision or a change. It helps us very, very well to think about which supporters you can strengthen, and also identifying which opposing or resisting forces you can eliminate or weaken. As I say, very often it is best to concentrate on the restraining forces, like removing barriers. And this also teaches us how to make a change more successful. So you're embarking on a change, you're wondering what to do, there's a problem to be solved. We need a technique like force field analysis that will help us to do this, and it is a simple technique to use. So in our assignment for this section here, we're going to take a look at an example of upgrading medical equipment, say in a clinic or in a hospital. Clearly this is in the interest of patients, but the change of equipment is very, very expensive. For example, purchase and staff training and the disruption that will be caused. So I'd like you to draw up a force field analysis, either by yourself or in a team, identify the driving forces and identify the restraining forces to making this change. So remember, force field analysis is all about identifying these forces. The implementing of the change comes at a later stage and is not part of the force field analysis process. So in summary, force field analysis helps us to identify forces that reinforce the positives and eliminate the negatives. We identify forces for and against change and plot them on a simple diagram, as we have seen. It's most useful to remove the barriers to the change, and then we go and use this information to decide whether we want to implement a change. So that's how we use force field analysis in solving problems. I hope you found this video useful.